All right. As you see here, here's a limestone quarry. Yeah, this is something I want to model downstairs. I'm in the process of chipping away at like a 3 foot, or excuse me, 3 inch styrofoam sheet. And boy, what a mess. But hopefully that answers. This quarry here is Rockwell Lime, and it's about maybe 3 miles north of where I am. Now, you can see the stratification. I just love geology and this, the different levels of limestone, the limestone cuesta. And this limestone is, like eastern Wisconsin, it sits on this limestone layer, and there's quarries all over. There's a quarry about 5 miles north or 3 miles north of here, and then there's another one right next to it. And it was serviced by the CNW. In fact, it's serviced by the CN. Excuse me. And they, when I worked in the summertime on the Wisconsin Central, we'd go up there three times in a week, and it was very interesting because they said, okay, Rich, put the covered hoppers over here. And I said, I'm not going in there because I can't see the rails, because it was just so, there was so much limestone dust from all the goings on in there. But I think this picture right here is like in the teens, 19 teens. You can see in the bottom there's a gentleman standing next to a little cart. And boy, what a job this was, real backbreaker. If anybody has any comments or questions, please don't be afraid to ask. Now you can see in the bottom of that little cart, and there's tracks that narrow gauge, like 2-foot gauge tracks that run all over in the pit. Now here's a map of the Niagara Escarpment that runs from Door County, eastern Wisconsin, all the way over to Lake Ontario and Canada. So, but this whole thing, it's like the cuesta itself is like a big bowl shape that goes underneath the Great Lakes. And so there you are. If you have any questions about that, that was kind of a fun little discovery to get this map on here. Now this is a close-up of the pit and the limestone kilns. You see in the front there, kind of in the middle, it's that's their wood yard, and they just kept tons and tons of like 4-foot long logs that would fire these limestone kilns, and those are all braced with like 8x8s wrapped around. In fact, a couple of them still exist to this day. And then there's a track that ran across the top that had little carts that would come along and dump the limestone that they've dug out of the pits, and that would go. Then they would fire it. I don't know, can you see the little pointer?
Yes.
Okay, so they would fire it down below here, and all the limestone itself would be dumped here. I don't know how long they burned it, but it came out as like a powder, like a slurry. So, and then over here is I'll show you later, but there's like a shed that protects the people that are working on this from weather. Now here, this is looking down into the pit with the little, kind of like mine cars. And I suspect, like they would just drag the ends of the tracks around to suit, wherever they're working at the time. Walthers makes a kit like with these tracks that that, you know, like they have like a switch and some curved track and then some straight track. But boy, when I found that, I was thought, all right, this is perfect. Now you can see the kilns over here with this roof, you know, where the people would work and they would stoke the kilns over here. And there's a wooden box car. Reason I wanted to have this in here is these are all wood box cars. When I went over there to Rockwell Lime to ask if they had any pictures or information, I talked to the chemist who was also the secretary, and I told her, I said, you know, there was somebody I talked to quite a while ago that said that the quicklime that comes out of here, if it gets wet, there's a chemical reaction and it starts to heat up. And they actually had a car that heated up just enough that it started on fire. So, and she said that's absolutely correct. It never happened when she was there. But, you know, with the wooden cars, there were the roofs were leaky, and they could have some serious problems with that. But I just thought as a model railroader, it would be fun to get an old wooden boxcar kit and sand all the wood parts. So it's just the metal part of the steel struts, and you know, like on the boxcar, and then have it painted up so like it was started on fire, and then just knock the whole thing over, because there was no spraying water on it when it got hot enough to burn. I mean, they couldn't put it out with a hose, I guess, from what she said. I just put, this is a migrant worker house that like there was a hippie canning down south of Manitowoc, and every year at harvest time, you know, all these people would come there with their old beat up trucks and stuff, and they would stay in these migrant worker houses. And they were pretty common along the lake shore. Cherry pickers and apple pickers and whatnot, they would all stay in little places like this and leave their derelict vehicles behind. This is the Northwestern's main line downstairs. They had a like a 1.5 mile long passing siding, which was typical of the CNW here. And they would bring a train in, and excuse me, they were always like 2 trains long, and they would come in nose to nose and park here. And then when the passenger train or the faster train would go by, then the one of the trains that was in the siding would back up, and the other one would follow it through, and you know, so that they could pass or let the one here on the main line pass them by. So I wanted to model that with like burnt or cut ties, and of course the railroad said to the county, listen, if you want that out of there, you can take it out of there yourself. So now this is an example of limestone. This is, you know, like they would make a cut to you know, for the main line through here, and then you could see that, just like before, you could see the strata, the limestone strata, and this is simply plaster smeared on this on the slope here. And then I took a dental pick and scraped it out of there to represent the strata, and then I stained it with a dilute black wash with alcohol wash, and then a little bit of yellow wash in there too. So, but this is very typical of the area that I live in. And so the limestone they used limestone for, like the chinking on these barns, the chinking on the house. And let's see, and here's some more, some more of the limestone strata that they just left there. This is a farm from Door County, and that was typical. It was typical, which made it was wonderful for a wonderful opportunity for modeling. Now the silo right here is a cut from a 2x4. I just simply measured it up, the real one, and cut the blank out here and painted it with white white paint mixed in with plaster, and it made it for an interesting texture. And then this whole thing was one solid piece of wood, and just simply glued the siding on here. And the barn itself was like a plywood armature. So it was a big piece of plywood that I got from my father-in-law when they remodeled the basement. This little shed right here, when I took pictures and measured it up, there was some boards that went across the window, and I asked the farmer, the old Emery Roberts, I said, how come there's boards on here? He said, well, if the cows came along, and they typically would lean on the window and break the window out, so they had to board up the windows a little bit. I mean, it was still glass, but this was for keeping the cows from wrecking the thing. And this is the house that went with the farm. This is all plaster cut to shape. And same thing with the stoops and the foundation was a slab of plaster and then carved similar to the chimney here. And there's the outhouse built in the same fashion. But these are all birch twigs that my kids and their friends in the neighborhood went around picking up little birch twigs, the dry ones that would snap, and notch them out. And these are the roof shingles are made from a sheet of what do you call it? Cedar sheets that they put inside cigar tubes, and then I stained it with alcohol and white chalk, and cut them up, and they were all about the size of a match head, which was I had the privilege of monkeying around with that for a month or so. And here's the barn from the other side. But this is all like drywall compound, and then you just scraped it with a dental pick till it was recessed enough to resemble the original. I was so flattered when my aunt looked at that, and she says, "Oh, Richie, I didn't realize that there was a railroad that ran past their house up in Door County." And I said, "Yeah, Stell, thank you, but you're right, they never did." Hanke and Western was probably about 5 miles from there, but it was not an issue for this barn here. That's it from another angle. I've recently put little piles of manure, and the manure was from teak sawdust I got from Burger Boat, where they build fancy yachts. And I have a little can of that stuff so I can kind of sprinkle it around where there's going to be some livestock and things. But I put little piles of that, um, like the teak sawdust, and it has the right look for manure piles. This was a common sight around Rockwell Lime. They would bring in carloads of logs, and 4-foot logs, and for their kilns. And there were piles and piles, just tons of this. This is Highway 10 between Manitowoc and Appleton, Wisconsin. And I've got to put some stripes over here because from what I've heard, that there's a lot of people that on Friday nights, Saturday nights, ran into these abutments down here. And these are postcards for, like gas station postcards. I've cut the barns out, and they just so small enough, but they look like they're off in the distance. And I had to have a police car. I put a little cherry on this thing here, like an LED that flashes, because my son-in-law is a city policeman, so I had to have something to show my support. This is Rockwell Lime from another angle. Here's the enormous wood pile that came in by rail, and these are company houses, so that the workers had a place to stay. And this is the company chemistry building. And by the way, there's one of these left, but all this stuff is still there, these buildings. Thank goodness. You can see the trestle that there's a winch that goes in another building back here, and it would winch up those little carts and dump the limestone that was quarried. To dump them in here, and then when it's done cooking, it comes out into this building here. And then the farmers could actually buy limestone screenings for their farmyard and the such. So you could buy almost like pea gravel size limestone. So there was a real call for that. Oops. And this is a little farm pond right here. One of the principals at the school I taught at told me about how, like in our area, farmers would fill up a 55-gallon drum with fuel oil and and light the thing and run like the dickens, and it would blast the hole for a farm pond. One of the other mining industries in our area is clay. They call this the clay pit right here. And they would dig that up and take it to a little shed over here and mix it with water and pump it underneath the Sioux Line Bridge to make cement. And it would be this eventually would be the cement slurry that would be in the process. I think I have a picture of that too, but this is the high bridge. This is a CNW's main line that they put in 1911. This is another bridge, that Cass Bridge, that's still there. It's still it's in use as a like a bicycle trail, but this was put in 1911. And when they straightened out the CNW's line from Manitowoc to Green Bay, rather than kind of going through Appleton, which is out of the way, but when they built this bridge in 1911, this is for cattle, and this is for non-motorized vehicles. I think like horse and buggies and that sort of thing would go through here. And this is just for the cows. But when I made this, I took the styrene strips and made a mold for this thing here, and then arched that and then put a mold here so that you get the effect of like concrete molds. Same thing over here. These were, and I want to see if I can find some lettering for 1911. The guy that lives over here that has had that farm for years and years, Don Manlick and I were measuring this thing up from the model. And he comes over and he says, "You guys come on over to the house when you're done measuring that." And he gave me the picture of the original bridge when they were building it in 1911. So, and here's the wood yard for the kilns. And you see how much wood's gotten brought in here. The C&W made a bunch of cars, bunch of flat cars. In fact, I think I gave one to Ron. It was a flat car with bulkheads at either end. And I think they had like 100 of them, and they would bring in load after load from up north. And I think they also put them in box cars too. But you can see all the row after row of limestone or kiln fuel. And this is the write-up from that secretary who was also the chemist, and she was telling me about the different kinds of like the properties of all this the limestone that was ground up. Yeah, I really enjoy this little scene because this was exactly how it was back in the day. This is the Cleveland Co-op, which was built the same year I was born, which was perfect. And then this is all poured concrete. And so for these windows, these are like one piece of styrene, clear styrene, and I bent it here, obviously here and here. And these are 1x2 styrene strips painted silver. In fact, I think I even painted it with the silver Sharpie pen and then glued it on there. But the display of all the items that are for sale in there, I went over to the Ace Hardware store and asked them, "Hey, could I take a picture of your display here?" And they kind of looked puzzled and they said, "It's for a model railroad." "Oh yeah." And so then I just simply bent that around, and I think it worked out good, but it was like just something that they were kind enough to let me take a picture of it. And this is the water tank was one of the first modeling projects I did. Like I was at the center of the Cleveland Historical Society, and somebody came up and says, can you use a picture like this? And it was this whole scene. I said, well, I think I could do something with that, and then built that, and then I put a picture of the same scene in the newspaper. Yeah, the local newspaper to drum up a little interest, and sure enough, about 3 old guys said, "Hey, listen, the railroad guys would kick us out of there. We'd hang around underneath there in the summertime, and they shag them out of there." He said, but that was a fun time for them to remember that. And this is a church from up in Door County, not too far from that log barn, in that log farm rather. And I recently built this, and it's a Moravian church, and this whole church itself is made up of 2x6s glued together and then cut to shape on a table saw. So you could throw this thing through a window, but then I got one, I don't know, a wedding scene kit, like a bride and groom and minister and that, because my son and daughter-in-law just got married not long ago, and I said, oh, I will commemorate you guys over here. And I had a very difficult time finding a bell that would fit in the scale steeple here. This is that siding that they shortened up, and you can see how when they shortened it up, they took out the bridge and simply left the stubble in here. In fact, when I was measuring this bridge up, I noticed the stubble sitting here in the weeds, which made it a great opportunity. Same with the abutments here. Now I talked to the B&B guys, and they said they would put limestone gravel underneath these bridges, so that they wouldn't get a lot of weeds and a lot of brush under there, because that would be a fire hazard. So I made sure all the bridges I had did not have like scenery material like this in there, because it wasn't the right thing to do. And this is the motive power for the quarry in Rockwell. And I met this gentleman's grandson who looks a lot like this guy here. And so I asked the AP chairman in the area, I said, now, is it possible I could use this as a motive power for the motive power? Thank you. So he said, no, that'd be pretty tough.
One of the requirements is that it has to move. So you'd have to make a horse that moves.
I'm wondering how you do. I wouldn't do it, but it would be an interesting project. It's kind of a spoof. Maybe put a little magnet in here, with a piece of, like a magnet, and drag it along.
Tom Stathis could probably get that thing to the model with 4 legs moving.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got more to do than that. This is an aerial view of Manitowoc Sioux Line. They just had the Sioux Line Historical just had their convention here in Manitowoc a couple of weeks ago, and all this is gone except for one of these buildings over here. It's now a brewery, like a microbrewery. Here's the idler flats for the car ferry, which would have docked right over here. Here's the coal loading, the bucket coal loader, water tower, obviously, and this is an Armstrong turntable. And the gentleman that owned this oil depot went to my church and sat in front of me in there, and I would ask, hey, Bill, tell me about your oil, your oil depot here. So he really enjoyed the fact that somebody had some interest in that, other than just buying a gallon of oil or something. And the depot, the Sioux Line depot, was right over, like, back here. And that's it.
All right. Very nice, Rich.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing that.
Sure.
Yes, very enjoyable.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you liked it. It's so much fun. I enjoy kind of sniffing around for, pictures like this. I went over to Rockwell Lime and said, hey, have you got any whole pictures, of your quarry and your setup here? And then the gal that was in the front there shouted to the back and asked the guy that owned it if he had any pictures. Well, the guy that owned it never came out of his office, but he told the gal, just go get the big pictures, and there were like a lot of 11 by 14 pictures of the, like the whole affair here.
Mhm.
Very generous, and I said, you want to have me write my name and stuff down? He says, no, just bring it back in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
That's
Well,
great.
right.
Hey, Rich,
Go
on
ahead.
that bridge you were saying about lettering, Letraset used to, and I think you can still get them. It was coming out of Germany, but there's small plastic numbers that are
Sure.
raised, and they would be perfect for that bridge.
I
for
appreciate
the
that.
theater. It
No,
was Letraset plastic lettering.
I've looked around for that, and the local hobby, like Engine House doesn't have that, and I've tried to kind of beat the bushes to find that stuff. So that's one of my goals, is to find where, who's got some of that.
How
So-
tall should the letters be?
I'm gonna guess that the space is like no more than 1/4 of an inch, probably less.
I've
You can
got some, they're whistle posts with numbers on them. And I've actually cut the tops off and I use those numbers to number my yard. And I'm trying to think of who makes those. But I guess they're maybe 1/8 of an inch high.
Sure.
Let me look around while I'm thinking about it. Have a look for them.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. All I need is 1911 for one side, because the other side's not gonna need anything. You couldn't see it from the aisle. So, well, there you be.
All right, well, thanks again, Rich.
Thank you.
I'll be putting the recording of this out later this evening. And next week, Ron is gonna, he has prepared a presentation on the improvements he's made to a gas station. So that'll be interesting. And we'll go from there. If anybody on here is interested in presenting, just let me or Ron know and we'll get you on the schedule.
Okay.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.